What is the mark of the beast? Let's talk about it here on All Things Theology.
All things theology, all things theology. We chop it up properly without an apology. Gotta give that theology to God, hallowed be, cause this is how we do it at All Things Theology.
Yo, grace and peace, and welcome back to an episode of All Things Theology. And today we're going to be talking about the mark of the beast. Right off the set, is going to cause a lot of emotion, a lot of feelings about this, because there have been a lot of what I would believe are fanciful interpretations of what the mark of the beast is. Let me first say that I do not believe the mark of the beast is about a computer chip.
He doesn't need money. In fact, much of what he needs to get through the day is hidden right there, just below the surface, in his hand.
You like to touch it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, weird. Yeah, it's like a grain of rice.
Yeah, a grain of rice.
Embedded in his hand is a microchip that serves as his keys, his ID, and his wallet.
In our veins. Am I getting it? No, but that's beside the point. I don't believe it has to do with modern interpretations about getting injected the jab, right?
Would mandate your ability to be able to travel, your ability to be able to go to events, your ability to be able to buy and sell. And I asked the question earlier today, is this something like Biden's mark of the beast? Because that is really disturbing and not good.
None of those things. First and foremost, I believe that the mark of the beast would have to make sense to the audience at hand, right? What would the people of John, since that's primarily the text we'll be looking at today, what would they have thought when they have read the letter from John, right? And what would they have believed the mark of the beast was? I want you to ponder that for a second. First, before we get into the text, let me offer a hermeneutic principle while we're diving into the book of Revelation. A couple things to remember. The book of Revelation, no S on the end, one Revelation, right, it's an apocalyptic book filled with imagery and symbols from the Old Testament to convey a larger point at hand. You can see this all throughout the book. My first piece of evidence for that is in the first chapter, right? You have stars, right? Lampstands, all this imagery. Jesus being depicted as face radiant, right? Bronze feet. All these things are Old Testament imagery to convey an issue. Even at the end of the book of Revelation, or at the end of the chapter, he tells you the meaning, right? And I believe this is supposed to serve as a principle of the interpretive grid throughout the book. So with that said, let's actually get into our text for today. So as I stated, there are a few texts that mention the mark, right? The kerygma in the book of Revelation. And so I want to look at least one of them and discuss what I believe this means. Oh, and by the way, I have a lot of people asking me, what is this app I'm using? By the way, a good friend of mine has this app called Solar Search. We'll be adding Greek to it soon. So you want to download this app. But with our text, let's start Revelation 13, 14 through 17. And this is speaking about the second beast in the context. Maybe I'll have to do a video on what I believe the beast and who the Antichrist is and things like that. But nevertheless, it says, by the signs that it was allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. And it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead. And so next verse, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. That is the name of the beast or the number of its name. And goes on to 666, and I don't want to discuss all that. But for now, I want to say, again, discuss this issue of the beast, of the mark of the beast. Now, some would say, hey, this has to be literal because without this mark, It has to be a physical mark because without it, you cannot buy or sell, right? So you would have to be able to show it for this to be the case. Well, I'm going to disagree with that. Let me just share what I believe the mark is. Well, allow me to share what I believe about the mark of the beast. I believe the mark is not a physical mark, but rather a spiritual principle what the book is trying to convey. Where do I get this from? Again, right now I'm making just assertions, but I want to unpack some larger themes for us, right? One thing I want to look at before I, demonstrate this is Exodus 13, right? Exodus 13 tells us about this mark that the people of Israel would have, right? Let me read this. Exodus 13, 14 through 16. It says, "And when time comes, your son asks you, 'What does this mean?' You shall say to him, 'By a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery.' For when Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of the animals. Therefore I sacrificed to the Lord all the males that first opened the womb, but all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. So it shall be as a mark on your hand or frontlets between your eyes. For by a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt." And if you actually study, just an amazing study, when you just study the Old Testament, the author of the book of Revelation, the Apostle John, he is using a lot of these Old Testament themes, right? And so I know a lot of people want to make modern day applications. See, this is why it has to be a computer chip, right? But we actually have to ask the question: how is the Apostle John using this idea of a mark? Well, it seems clear to me that John is using these physical markings, right? And go throughout the book of the Old Testament. You have a lot of this imagery of marking the forehead, mark the right hand. And I believe what John is trying to depict for us is not a physical mark, but a spiritual identity. So with that in mind, let's look at the text again, right? Because it says to us, look at Revelation 13 again, right? It says, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, right? So with this marking, it allows purchase in the city, right? Freedom in the city. I believe ultimately what it's trying to get at is this right hand, this marking on the right hand, the foreheads, it's allegiance. It is allegiance to the beast. It is submission, worship to the beast. Now, where else how can I substantiate that? Well, I believe a parallel passage is what we find in Revelation 7:3, where it says, saying, "Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed." So this is another marking. Now, to be fair, it doesn't use the word kerygma, but it's the same word. It's a similar word for marking, right? So having sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. So here we have not only the people of the beast, the people of Satan, the mark of the beast, we have the mark of God. So I believe we're going to be consistent in our hermeneutic. We have to say, hey, if the physical mark, right, is or the mark is literal for the people of the beast, then wouldn't it have to be a literal mark for the people of God? Well, you always have people say, well, the mark of the beast, the computer chip, it's the jab, it's all this, but you never really hear people giving a physical mark about the people of God, right? I just find that interesting and ironic given that, right? Another text, which I believe further, substantiates my point is Revelation 22:3-4. It says, "No longer will there be anything accursed, but the throne of God, and of all the land will be in it, and his servants will worship him." Remember, I said this has to do with worship, right? Identification, allegiance to, right? We see all this in Revelation 22. And actually, if you actually go read the full chapter of Revelation 13, you see worship of the beast being done as well. But notice what it says in verse 4. "They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads." Again, this name being the believers being identified with God, his name being upon us is not a physical name like literally we have like Yahweh on our foreheads, but rather We are that identified with him, right? We are of his family. We are the ones who have worshiped him. And so I think that is important to highlight. Well, let me now read to you a biblical commentary, which I think you will find helpful, right? G.K. Beale has an amazing commentary, which you will be well to read if you want to go deeper on the book of Revelation. This is a shorter commentary. It blessed me very much as I was going through trying to figure out what I believed about all this stuff, right? Let me read something lengthy and we can talk about it here, which I believe brings out many of the things I was trying to bring out to the best of my ability, right? He says the demand, so he's commenting on verses 16 through 17 in Revelation 13. He says the demand that everyone, small and the great, the rich and poor, free and slaves, receive a mark on their right hand and on their forehead could be an allusion to the ancient practice of branding or tattooing disobedient slaves, soldiers, and loyal devotees to gods or of various religions. That's very interesting if that's the case, right? If the association with slaves is in mind, then the beast worshippers are seen as its property. If soldiers or religious devotees are in view, the worshippers are seen as the beast's faithful followers. Now, I believe it could be association with both. There's no reason to say, hey, it has to be one or the other, but it could be both, right? The beast's slaves as well as his faithful followers are the ones who are marked, right? Identified with him. He goes on to say, here the mark is clearly figurative for the way in which the state keeps check on whether people are submitting to compulsory idol worship. Those not submitting to receiving the mark are unable to buy or sell. So not submitting to the state's demands of worship of the beast will cost you even in the very essential things in life, right? This is a reference, continue with the book again. This is a reference back to Revelation 2:9 and Revelation 6:5-6. Check those out for your references. He says, where economic measures are directed against Christians. The mark, Greek word is charygma, was used for the emperor's seal on business contracts and for the impress of the Roman ruler's head on coins. If this background is in mind, then it enforces the metaphorical idea that the mark in Revelation 13 alludes to the state's political and economic stamp of approval, given only to those who go along with its religious demands, right? The mark on the forehead, which is the name of the beast or the number of his head, is the parody of and the opposite of the seal in Revelation 7:3-8, which is what we talked about, the seal of God, right? You have the seal of God and you have the parallel, you have the opposition to that, the seal of the beast, right? Remember, Satan is a counterfeit, right? God has a seal, Satan has his seal, right? Which is the divine name written on the forehead of true believers. And you also see a parallel to that in Revelation 22:4, which we talked about, and 3:12 as well. Since the seal or the name of the true believer is invisible, right? There's no marking on our foreheads, right? So is the mark of the unbeliever, which is exactly what I was talking about. That the two are of a parallel spiritual nature and intended to be compared is evident from the immediately following mention of the names of God and Christ written on the foreheads of the saints. Revelation 14:1. Check that for your reference. Believers are protected by the power of Christ's name, which is his presence with them. They may suffer and even die, yet they will receive the ultimate reward of eternal life. Hallelujah. Revelation 20:4. Unbelievers may receive temporary prosperity, but will be punished ultimately with eternal death. You see the parallel, you see the argument John is making. And this is why, from Revelation 1, this is supposed to be an encouragement to the believers who are experiencing suffering right now. Though you suffer now, glory, right? Though the wicked prosper, wrath, right? You see that? I hope you are seeing some of these things come out. The mark may also connotate that the followers of Christ and the beast both are stamped with the image or character of their respective leader, right? So we're stamped with the image of God, while the unbeliever is stamped with the image of Satan. This makes the book of Revelation, I believe, glorious and makes so much more sense than more fanciful interpretations that we see today and throughout history. Moving on, it says that the mark of the name is figurative and not literal is also evident from the picture of the beast, who has written on his head blasphemous names. Now, ask yourself this. Wouldn't we immediately know the beast if he just had blasphemous names literally written on his forehead? I mean, that wouldn't sound like someone who's coming in deception, right? But rather like blasphemy. Okay, it says Antichrist on his forehead. Okay, we know not to trust you, right? That would seem to give away his identification right there, right? He goes on to say, right, he has this written on his head, which figuratively connotates false claims to earthly divine kingship. Likewise, the point of saying that the worshippers of the beast have his name written on their heads is to underscore the fact that they pay homage to his blasphemous claims to divine kingship. In the Old Testament, God told Israel that the Torah was to serve as a sign on your head and a reminder on your hand and a reminder on your forehead, in order to remind them continually of their commitment and loyalty to God. And I believe that's exactly what the beast is trying to do. By virtue of having this spiritual figurative names written on their forehead or their hand, their right hand, the beast is trying to indicate continual allegiance to him over God. How blasphemous and rebellious, right? If you have that in mind. It goes way more than just having some name tag on our forehead, right? Remember, we have to allow the Bible to speak for itself on this issue. Likewise, as a travesty of the sign of the membership in the Old Testament community of faith, the beast marks on the forehead and the hands of the worship refer to loyal, consistent, and wholehearted commitment to him. Again, this is just a highlight of all the things that I've been studying, or I've actually, studied over the years that I want to communicate to you. So guys, let me know what you know in the comment section. Do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you disagree? Has it sparked some interest in this subject? Also, maybe want to do some more studies on things like the Antichrist. If you want me to do something like that, let me know. I'm as you can see, I'm very excited about content like this, and definitely want to do more content and teaching like this. So hopefully this was helpful. Till the next time, grace and peace. Yo, grace and peace. Thank you for watching another episode of All Things Theology. If you enjoyed what you heard today, go and give me a like, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell. I promise to give you weekly videos, lives, interactions, exposing false teachers, sharing with you, the viewer, my theological beliefs, things about the culture and the Bible. So if you're here for that, come on and join us.
Everybody